Istan had mapped 41 dead systems in her career. She was good at it, not because she was talented, though she was, but because she was patient in the way that most surveyors burned out trying to be. She could sit in the quiet hum of a survey pod for 6 hours and feel nothing but mild professional satisfaction. Dead systems were easy. Dead systems did not surprise you. Sector 09 was supposed to be dead. The Conclave's records said so. Pre-spacefaring debris field, negligible threat, 1 star, dim and old, 7 planets, none of them warm enough for anything that wanted to be alive. A handful of moons with names that were just catalog numbers. A place the galaxy had forgotten before it was ever remembered. She started with the 3rd moon of the 5th planet, standard, ice surface 3 kilometers deep in most places. Her scanner swept in long, slow arcs logging composition data, building the map in layers the way she'd been trained. Rock, ice, more ice. A vein of iron oxide running through the southern shelf. Nothing, nothing, nothing. Then something. Geometry. She almost scrolled past it. Her brain tried to file it as a natural formation. Pressure ridges did strange things. She knew that ice could fool you if you let it. She had let it fool her once, years ago, filed a report about a possible structure that turned out to be a frozen lava shelf bent by tidal stress. Her supervisor had been kind about it. She had not forgiven herself for 18 months. So she looked again. The angles were wrong for nature. Not a little wrong, completely wrong. Nature did not make 90-degree corners at that scale. Nature did not repeat the same curve at precise intervals across 4 kilometers of buried surface. Nature was beautiful, but it was messy, and it did not measure itself. This was measured. She ran the scan again, then a 3rd time. She changed the frequency, widened the sweep, let the scanner go deeper, pushing down through the ice until the resolution blurred at the edges and then sharpened again around the thing below. Aho! She sat very still for a moment. It was a ship. The shape of it was unmistakable once the scanner found the full outline, long, tapered at both ends, with structures along the dorsal surface that could only be weapon mounts or sensor arrays or both. It was big, bigger than anything in the Conclave's active fleet by a factor she didn't want to calculate right now. It sat under 3 kilometers of ice on a moon no one had named, in a system the Conclave had written off as empty, and it sat there the way things sit when they have been sitting for a very long time. She ran the metallurgical analysis. The alloy came back with no match. She ran it again, this time opening the full database, 11,000 years of documented spaceflight across 63 species, every hull material ever catalogued, every alloy ever recorded. The Conclave was thorough. The Conclave kept records the way old civilizations built temples, with the understanding that the record itself was sacred. No match. The material was not in the database, not similar to something in the database, not a variant of a known compound, simply absent. As if whatever made the ship had done so before the database began, before the record started, before anyone was writing anything down. She widened the scanner sweep. Found another hull. Then another. She widened the sweep again, pulled back to get the full picture of the moon's subsurface and watched the numbers climb on her screen. 10, 19, 31, 47. 47 ships. All the same alloy, all the same design language, that same long tapered shape with the weapon mounts running along the spine. All buried, all sitting in the dark under the ice of a moon that was supposed to have nothing on it, in a system that was supposed to be empty, in a sector the Conclave had categorized as negligible. Istan picked up her pen, clicked it once, set it down, picked it up again. She filed the report. She flagged it Priority 3 not because she thought it was Priority 3, but because she did not know what priority it actually was, and Priority 3 was the flag for things you needed someone else to decide about. She included all the scan data, all the metallurgical results, the full count, the coordinates, every number she had. Then she sat back and looked at the scanner readout still glowing on her screen. The Conclave's routing system took the report and sent it to the xenoarchaeology desk, because the alloy match failure suggested age, and old things went to xenoarchaeology. Xenoarchaeology looked at the system coordinates, checked their territorial records, and routed it sideways to the Human Liaison Office, because Sector 09 sat inside what the maps called former human territorial claim, pre-contact era. The Human Liaison Office was a small department. Humans had only been in the Conclave for 60 years. They had joined quietly, with 17 ships and a diplomatic team that was polite and careful and never quite said more than it meant to. They did not have a large office. They did not need one. The report landed on the desk of Soren Vale, mid-level liaison, 3rd year in the position, known by his colleagues as steady and unremarkable in the best way. He read it. His face did something. Not surprise. His colleagues, if they had been watching, would not have called it surprise. It was closer to the expression of someone who has been waiting for a knock at the door and finally hears it, not shocked by the sound, but aware that the thing on the other side of the door is now, after a long time, real. He requested a secure channel to Earth. His colleague at the next desk, a Velhari named Prishan, glanced over. Secure channels were not unusual, but they were not common either. She noticed he did not explain the request. He just sat quietly until the channel opened, and then he spoke in a low voice with his back slightly turned, and she could not hear what he said, and she told herself it was not her business. She went back to her work. But later, much later, she would remember that moment. The quietness of it, the complete absence of alarm in how he moved and spoke. A man filing the most important report in the history of the Conclave with the energy of someone checking items off a list. She would remember it because of what came after, because of everything that came after. I stand back on her survey pod in Sector 09 had moved on to the next moon. Catalog number, ice surface, 3 kilometers deep in most places. She was doing her job. She was being professional. But she kept clicking the pen. She could not stop seeing the geometry, the angles that did not belong to nature. The repeat of that curve, precise and deliberate, across 4 kilometers of buried dark. 47 hulls sitting in the silence of a moon that was supposed to have nothing on it. Something had put them there. Something had put them there, and then gone away and left them waiting. She told herself it was salvage, old wreckage from some forgotten war. The galaxy had old wars the way old houses had settling, the structure shifted, it creaked, it left marks, and eventually you stopped noticing. There were ruins in a dozen systems she could name. Ruins were normal. Ruins were the xenoarchaeology desk's problem. She clicked the pen again. Ruins did not have metallurgical profiles that weren't in the database. Ruins did not all have the same alloy, the same design, the same careful arrangement, and it was careful. She had noticed that even through the ice, the spacing between vessels was not random. It was deliberate, the way you would park a fleet if you intended to be able to launch it again. She stopped clicking the pen. She looked at her scanner, still running its sweep across the new moon's surface. She found herself hopping, for reasons she couldn't explain and would not have wanted to, that this one was clean, that this one was just ice and rock and iron oxide running through a southern shelf, that this moon, at least, had nothing in it. The scanner finished its first pass. She looked at the results. She picked up the pen. She did not click it this time. She just held it in both hands and looked at the new geometry appearing on her screen and understood, in the way that understanding sometimes arrives before the mind is ready for it, that Sector 09 was not a dead system. It had never been dead. It had been waiting for someone to look. The woman who walked into the Conclave's high chamber did not look like a threat. She was old, Not old in the way that powerful people sometimes performed age, the heavy robes, the slow movement, the weight of authority worn visibly. She was old the way a tool is old when it has been used for exactly what it was made for and has the wear to prove it. Her name was Dara Osai. She was retired. She had come in civilian clothes. She was carrying a data core tucked under one arm the way someone carries a book they borrowed and are finally returning. She had come alone. No escort, no diplomatic team, no fleet positioned outside for negotiation leverage. The conclave's outer sensor grid had confirmed it 3 times because the operators kept assuming they were reading it wrong. 1 human transport, 1 occupant, no weapons array, no support vessels trailing at a distance. Just her. The high chamber held 400 seats when full. Today it was full. Word had moved fast through the conclave's 63 species in the 4 days since Istan's report had stopped being a xenoarchaeology problem and started being everyone's problem. Survey teams had gone back to Sector 09, then to 4 other systems with similar flags, old anomalies, low priority, never fully investigated. What they found in those systems matched what Istan had found. The same alloy, the same design. The same patient, deliberate burial under ice and rock, vessel after vessel, waiting in the dark like a thought someone had written down and set aside to return to later. The count, as of this morning, was 319 ships across 6 systems. All of them human. All of them pre-contact, older by the metallurgical evidence than anything in the conclave's history, older than the conclave itself. Dara Os walked to the podium, set down her data core, looked out at 400 representatives of 63 civilizations, and said the first thing she said, which was, "I'm sorry about the timing. Not sorry about the ships, not sorry about the secrecy. Sorry about the timing, as if the inconvenience of discovery was the thing that required an apology. As if humanity had left something on the floor and someone had tripped over it, and the polite response was to apologize for the obstacle." The chamber was very quiet. She opened the data core. The conclave had been expecting records, territorial claim documents maybe, salvage rights, something in the bureaucratic language of pre-contact civilizations marking ownership of dead systems, something manageable, something that had a filing category. What appeared on the chamber's display was a history. Not the history the conclave had on file for humanity. Not the 300 years of cautious, incremental spaceflight. Not the civilization that had arrived 60 years ago with 17 ships and a handshake and a reputation for being polite and slightly hard to read. The real history. The first timestamp on the first document in the data core was 11,214 years ago. The chamber absorbed this in silence. The Velhari delegation in the 7th row went very still in the specific way their species went still when processing information their nervous systems weren't built for. The doer patriarch Kethsalan, 4,000 years old, who had watched 9 civilizations rise in his lifetime and 4 of them fall, sat in the front row and did not move at all. Dara let them sit with the number. Then she began talking. She talked for 2 hours. She did not rush. She went through the data core's contents in order, section by section, the way someone walks a visitor through a house. Here is this room, here is what happened in this room, here is the room after that. The history of humanity she described was not a story of triumph. It was not an empire built and expanded. It was something harder and stranger than that. It was a civilization that had been fighting for longer than most civilizations had existed. The ships were old, yes. The survey teams had confirmed that, but they were not ruins. That was the thing Dara came back to quietly and without drama multiple times across those 2 hours. The word mattered. Ruins were things that had broken. These ships had not broken. They had been powered down. They had been buried. The systems aboard them had been set to a standby state that required, she said, occasional maintenance. Maintenance. The word landed in the chamber and just sat there. Someone had been maintaining the buried fleet. For thousands of years, some part of humanity had been going to these moons and these dead systems, and these buried ships and keeping them ready, while joining the conclave, while trading with 63 other species, while having arguments about taxes and treaties and border protocols, while seeming, to all external observation, like a modest young civilization finding its feet in a galaxy full of older, more established powers. While doing all of that, they had been keeping the ships ready. Kethsalan asked the question before anyone else could find the words for it. He did not raise his hand. He simply spoke, in the low, deliberate tone of someone who had spent 4,000 years learning how to make a room hear him. "You said the ships are in standby," he said. "Not abandoned, not lost. Standby, which means there is a condition under which they would be taken out of standby." Dara looked at him. "Yes," she said. "What is that condition?" Dara was quiet for a moment, not an evasive quiet, a thinking quiet, the quiet of someone selecting the right words for a weight that ordinary words weren't built to carry. "We went quiet," she said finally. "We had reasons." The chamber waited. "The reasons are in the data core," she said. "Section 7. I'd recommend reading it before you ask the follow-up question. Not because the follow-up question is wrong, because the answer to it will make more sense if you read Section 7 first." She picked up her data core. She looked out at 400 representatives and 63 civilizations, and one very old doer patriarch who was looking at her, with 4,000 years of pattern recognition running behind his eyes. "We didn't want to tell you," she said, "about any of this, not yet, possibly not ever if things went the way we hoped." A pause. "We liked what you built here, all of you. The conclave is good, not perfect, but good. You argue about trade routes and environmental protocols and representation ratios, and that means you're alive and you're building things, and those are the only arguments worth having." She paused again. "We didn't want to change that. We didn't want to put something in the room that would change the way you argued, change what you were arguing for." No one spoke. "We also weren't sure," she said, "that we were done." The data core was in the chamber system now. Section 7 was 216 pages, and the chamber's translation systems were already working through it, and the first pages were appearing on individual delegate screens. And in the 7th row, the Velhari counselor Prishan was reading the opening paragraph of Section 7 with her hands very flat on the desk in front of her. She was glowing, faintly, in the frequency her species used when the body felt something before the mind had named it yet. She did not know she was doing it. On the podium, Dara Osai had gone quiet. She was looking at the data core, a small, ordinary-looking object, the kind of thing you wouldn't look twice at if you passed it in a corridor. It contained 11,000 years. Kethsalan was still watching her. When she looked up, he asked one more question. "How many ships?" he said, "total?" Dara considered him. "The ones you found," she said, "are the ones we were comfortable with you finding." The chamber sat with that. 400 representatives, 63 civilizations, one small, ordinary data core on a podium, and the ghost of a number no one had asked yet because they weren't sure they wanted it confirmed. Dara Os picked up her data core and tucked it back under her arm. "Read Section 7, she said. "Then we'll talk." Section 7 arrived on every delegate screen at the same time. That was intentional. Humanity had been careful about that, all 63 species receiving the briefing simultaneously, no one learning before anyone else, no hierarchy in the order of knowing. It was a small thing. It was also the kind of small thing that told you something about who you were dealing with if you were paying attention. A species that had kept a secret for 11,000 years knew exactly how secrets broke apart. They were not going to let this one break unevenly. The briefings went out over 48 hours. Each one was translated into the receiving species' primary language. Each one included cultural context for the concepts that did not translate cleanly. Each one arrived with a single note at the top, the same note for all 63 species, written in plain language with no diplomatic softening. This will be difficult to read. We are sorry for that. We are not sorry for what we did. Those are two different things, and we want to be clear about the difference from the start. Section 7 described an enemy. There was no name for them in any human language still spoken. The oldest surviving human records, the ones Dara had shown the conclave, the ones that went back 11,000 years, referred to them in a way that translated roughly as the architects of ending, not their name. Humanity had never learned their name. The phrase was a description of function, what they were for. They were not, the briefing was careful to explain, interested in conquest. Not in the way that civilizations usually were, taking territory or resources or labor or political control. Not in the way that made a conflict into something you could negotiate around or concede to or outlast through endurance. The architects of ending were not interested in what humanity had. They were interested in the fact that humanity existed. That sapient life, on Earth and anywhere else it might take root, existed. Their entire orientation, as far as 11,000 years of human study could determine, was toward ending it. Not because of hatred, not because of competition, because of something that did not translate at all. Something the human linguists, across millennia of trying, had only ever been able to describe as a cosmological function. The way a star burned because burning was what it was. The way entropy moved because moving was its nature. They came for Earth first. The briefing described the early wars in short, plain sentences. The detail was not graphic. Whoever wrote this part had understood that drowning the reader in horror was not the same as making them understand. What they needed to understand was the shape of it, not the inside. Humanity built ships, fought, lost badly, retreated to the inner system and then to the ground and then to underground, built bigger ships, fought again, lost again but slower this time with more cost to the enemy, retreated farther, went quiet, went small, went deep underground into the silence of their own planet and started over. This happened more than once. The third time humanity rebuilt, they did it differently. Not a fleet to fight the next battle, a fleet to fight the last one. A fleet that was not going to launch until it was ready to end the war, not just survive the next engagement. They built it across 10,000 years, in secret, in the ice of dead moons and in the rock of abandoned systems, behind debris fields and in the cold dark between stars where no one was looking. They built it piece by piece, ship by ship, with the patience of a species that had learned at enormous cost what impatience bought you. They maintained it quietly, and they waited. The briefing did not describe what happened when the fleet finally moved. That section was flagged, a small icon beside the heading. The translation, in every language the briefing reached, was the same: content restricted species-specific trauma designation. Not classified, not militarily sensitive, not redacted for strategic reasons. Trauma. Several delegates read that word and then read it again. The doer patriarch Keth Salon, in his private chambers, sat with the briefing open on his screen for a long time before he went any further. He had lived 4,000 years. He had, in that time, seen species go to war and come back from it changed. He had seen species go to war and not come back from it at all. He thought he knew what the residue of a long fight looked like. He was not sure he had seen this before. A wound so large that a civilization had built 11,000 years of silence around it like a wall, not to hide the wound from others, to protect others from knowing it was there, to let the rest of the galaxy live in the clean, ordinary arguments of a universe that did not know what lived in its dark. Soren Vale received the first formal response from the Velhari Council 3 days after the briefings went out. The Council's question was sent through official channels, diplomatic language, careful phrasing. But the thing underneath the phrasing was simple and it was honest, and he appreciated that about the Velhari. They were a species that had been pacifist for 6,000 years, and they were not comfortable with the contents of Section 7, but they were not pretending to be comfortable with it either. The question was, why didn't you tell us? He sat with the question for a while. He was in his office, small and unremarkable, the same one he had been in when Istan's report first landed. He had a cup of tea going cold on his desk. He was looking out the small window at the conclave's central hub, at the towers and transit lines, and the slow movement of 1,000 species going about the ordinary business of being alive. Then he opened a channel to the council, and he said, "You were happy, all of you. The conclave was good. Not perfect, it's never perfect, but good. You argue about trade routes and tax treaties and representation ratios. You have art movements and architectural fashions and disagreements about who gets credit for which scientific discovery." He paused. "Those are the arguments you have when you're alive and you're building something and you believe the future is a place you're going to get to." He looked out the window. "We didn't want to tell you there was something in the dark that considers all of that a problem to be solved. Something that looks at a civilization that makes art and argues about taxes and sees not a neighbor, not a resource, just an ending that hasn't happened yet." The council was quiet. "We also weren't sure," he said, "that it was over." There it was again, the same sentence Dara had used in the high chamber, not sure it was over, said the same way she had said it, without drama, without weight applied artificially. A plain sentence describing a plain fact. 11,000 years and they were still not sure, still maintaining the ships, still keeping one hand on the door handle just in case the knock came. The Velhari counselor Prishan, who had been in the high chamber and had spent 3 days reading Section 7 and everything around it, spoke. "Are they still out there?" Soren said nothing for a moment. "We have not confirmed another incursion in 600 years, he said. "That is the most honest answer I can give you." "That isn't the same as no." "No," he said, "it isn't." Prishan was quiet. Then she said, "Why tell us now? The ships were found, yes, but you could have managed that. Claimed salvage rights, closed access to those systems, controlled the information. You are clearly capable of controlling information for a very long time." Soren picked up his cold tea, looked at it, set it down. "Because you deserve to know," he said, "and because we are tired." A pause. "Not the kind of tired that means we'll stop. Just the kind that means carrying it alone for this long has a weight to it, and we are ready, if anyone is willing, to not carry all of it alone." He said it the way you say a thing you have rehearsed, because you needed to know you could say it out loud. Prishan sat with that. Her hands were flat on the desk in front of her. She was glowing again, faintly, in that same low frequency. She noticed it this time. She didn't stop. The signal lasted 4 minutes and 17 seconds. It came from deep space, beyond the conclave's outermost monitoring stations, in the dark between the edge of mapped territory and whatever came after. The station that caught it was Relay Post 11, a small installation, 6 crew, the kind of posting junior staff got sent to when someone needed to fill a slot and there were no exciting options left. The crew flagged it through standard protocol. Unknown encoding. Unknown origin. Signal duration, 4 minutes, 17 seconds. No repeat transmission detected. The flag moved through the conclave's communication system at the speed of bureaucracy. Unknown signals went to the analysis desk. The analysis desk would log it, attempt to decode, and return results in 4 to 6 standard days. The Human Liaison Office received a copy automatically. All deep space signal activity was shared across departments since the fleet disclosure. A new protocol, still feeling new and slightly uncomfortable the way new protocols did. Soren Vale read the flag. He looked at the timestamp. The signal had been received 11 minutes ago. He looked at the analysis desk's estimated response time, 4 to 6 days. He picked up his communicator and called the conclave's signal analysis lead directly, which was not standard, and she told him so. "I know," he said. "How long to decode it?" 4 to 6. "I have a different question," he said. "Has the Human Science Division contacted you yet?" A pause. "No," she said. "They will," he said, "in about 30 seconds. 24 seconds later. Her second communicator lit up with an incoming call from the Human Science Division. She looked at both communicators. Then she looked at the timestamp on the signal flag. 11 minutes. The Human Science Division decoded the signal in 11 minutes, not because they were faster than the conclave's best analysis team, because they already knew the encoding. They had seen it before. They knew it the way you know a sound you have been trained to recognize since childhood, not with your mind first, with your body first, with the part of you that was taught before anything else what to listen for. Sarin sent the Conclave Security Council a formal notification. He did it with his hands completely steady. This, too, was a thing he had been trained for. The notification said, "Signal decoded, nature and origin confirmed, standing by for council response. Recommend immediate classified session." It did not say what the signal was. That information went to the council in a separate, encrypted packet that only opened once 3 council members had authenticated simultaneously. While the council was authenticating, 17 things happened at once. In a system called Reach 9, a moon that had appeared in astronomy records for 200 years as a dense, irregular satellite with a gravitational signature that the Conclave's Planetary Science Division had filed 2 anomaly reports about, and then moved on from, that moon began to move. Not drift, not shift, move with direction and purpose. In 6 other systems, objects that the Conclave's long-range sensors had catalogued as debris, as irregular asteroids, as the kind of unremarkable mass that collected in the quiet corners of a solar system and did nothing, those objects began to move. The Conclave's sensor operators logged the movement with increasing alarm. By the time the 3rd object was confirmed in motion, someone had already sent a threat assessment flag. By the 5th, the flag had been upgraded twice. By the 7th, the council session was no longer classified. It was open. Every seat in the emergency chamber was filling. Then the object's full profiles came through on the deep sensor sweep. Not moons, never moons. Ships. The wrong shape for moons if you looked closely, and the Conclave had been looking closely for 2 weeks, since Istan's report had made everyone start looking closely at things they had filed and forgotten. The gravitational signatures had always been slightly off, too regular, too dense in the wrong distribution. The anomaly reports had been correct. No one had followed them far enough. 17 ships emerged from 17 different locations simultaneously, each one the size of what the Conclave classified as a heavy cruiser, which was to say enormous by any standard the Conclave used, each one trailing the cold residue of a long dormancy, ice crystals burning off the hull in slow clouds as the ship systems came alive. Then long-range human sensors shared their feed with the Conclave. Each of those 17 ships was a command vessel, and behind each one, in formation, spreading back into the dark of their respective systems like the unfolding of something that had been folded for a very long time, were the rest. The Conclave's combined military capacity was 2,412 active vessels. This number was considered, by every strategic analysis the Conclave had commissioned in its history, to be more than sufficient for any conflict with any known power, more than sufficient for any threat in the historical record. The fleet rising from the ice of 17 systems was not a number. It was a different kind of thing. The Conclave's counting systems ran the estimates 3 times and returned 3 different results because the sensor data kept updating as more vessels came online, more systems woke, More formations spread into the dark. The estimates converged eventually. The Security Council received the final number in a quiet message that 3 of its members read twice, and 1 of its members read 4 times before setting down her communicator. Soren Vale was in the emergency chamber when the council session opened. He was sitting, not standing. He had a cup of tea. It was hot this time. He had made it before the session started because he had known the session was coming, and he had known it would be long, and he had made the tea with the same calm efficiency with which he did everything. The council's senior chair, a Velhari elder named Osran, looked at him across the chamber. "The signal," Osran said. "What does it mean?" "It is a location marker," Soren said. "It means they found something they want the others to see." The chamber waited. "The architects of ending," he said, saying the name in full for the first time in an official session, in the plain way you said the name of a thing you had lived with long enough that it no longer needed dramatic handling. "This is how they begin. They mark a location. Others converge on it. Then they move together." "How long do we have?" "Less than we would like, more than we need." Kethsalan, who had been silent through the first part of the session, spoke. "Are you afraid?" The chamber went very quiet. It was not an insult. Everyone knew it was not an insult. It was the question of someone trying to understand what he was looking at. 4,000 years, and he was trying to understand the thing sitting across from him with a cup of tea. Soren thought about it, not quickly, for real. "We were," he said. "For about 9,000 years we were terrified." He set down his tea. Every generation grew up knowing the story. What happened before, how bad it got, how close it came. The fear was real and it was passed down, and it did not get smaller with time. If anything, it got more exact because the history got more specific as we added to it, and specific fear is worse than vague fear. He looked at Kethsalan. "And then at some point, not all at once, not a single moment, but across a few generations, the fear changed into something else. Something that did the same job but felt different from the inside." Kethsalan waited. "Anger," Soren said. "We got angry, a slow, very patient, very old anger." He picked up his tea again. "We've had a long time to get there." Through the chamber's main display, the fleet was still waking up. 17 systems. Ice and rock burning off hulls that had been cold for centuries. Ships finding their formations the way a fist finds its shape, without hurry, without noise. Just certainty. Just readiness. Just 10,000 years of patience arriving, finally, at the moment it had been built for. They came at the edge of known space. 17 formations, moving in the unhurried way of something that had never once been told no in a way that lasted. The conclave's outermost sensors caught them first, the sensor operators at Relay Post 11, the same small station that had caught the signal, now watching their displays fill with contacts the way a room fills with water. Slow. Then all at once. 17 formations, each formation containing hundreds of vessels. The Conclave's Security Council, already in emergency session, received the contact data in real time. The senior analysts ran the engagement projections. They ran them twice. The second run returned the same numbers as the first, which meant the numbers were correct and not a system error, and 3 analysts left the room briefly after confirming that. Outside, through the chamber's reinforced viewport, the conclave's hub went on. Transit lines moving, towers lit. 1,000 species going about the business of the afternoon with no knowledge yet of what the sensor screens were showing. Art movements and tax arguments and the ordinary irreplaceable noise of a civilization that believed it had a tomorrow. Soren Vale received word that Dara Osai's vessel had reached the fleet's command ship. The flagship had no official name in any language the conclave recognized. The human crew called it simply First. It was the oldest vessel in the fleet, the one built earliest, the one that had waited longest. It was also the largest. The conclave's classification system had no category for it. Their largest vessel type, the Dreadnought class, was not to the flagship what the flagship was to the Dreadnought class. It was a different order of thing, a word that didn't exist yet. Dara Os sat in the command chair of a ship that had been asleep under the ice of a dead moon for 400 years and felt, beneath the weight of everything, a strange and specific relief. Not because the waiting was over, not because the fight was here and therefore the anticipating of it was done, because she was not doing this alone. That was the thing she had not expected to feel. The thing she had not let herself expect because wanting it made it too heavy to carry. 11,000 years, and it had always been alone. Humans against the ending in the dark. The secret that protected everyone else by being kept. And now the Conclave knew. All 63 species. They knew what was coming and they had not scattered, and they had not pretended they could stop it without the fleet that was already moving into position. They had not tried to tell humanity to stand down. That, more than anything, was the thing. The fleet moved into the space between the Conclave's explored territory and the incoming formations. The movement was orderly. Not fast, the enemy was still hours out and rushing served nothing. The fleet moved the way a door closes, deliberate, final. The shape of it in the sensor feeds was almost clean, almost beautiful, if you did not know what it was for. Stan was watching from her survey pod in Sector 09. She had not been evacuated. There was nothing for her to evacuate to. The enemy was not in her sector, and her survey post had better deep-range sensor access than most monitoring stations. The human liaison assigned to her sector had asked if she wanted a direct feed from the fleet command. She had said yes before he finished the question. So she watched. The contact happened at the edge of human sensor range, which was considerably farther than the Conclave's sensor range, which meant the Conclave saw it second. Stan saw it first. The enemy formations were large. She had understood this from the numbers. Understanding it from the numbers and seeing it on her sensor display were two different experiences, and the second one was worse. The formations moved as units, each vessel holding its position in the larger shape with a precision that was not mechanical. It was disciplined, which was worse than mechanical, because discipline implied decision, implied the choice to hold position even when holding was costly. She had never seen the architects of ending before. No one in the Conclave had. She had read Section 7 3 times in the week since the briefings went out. She had thought she was prepared for what they would look like on a sensor feed. She was not. Then the human fleet met them. Dara Os gave one instruction to the fleet. No declaration, no transmission to the enemy, no speech. One sentence sent through the fleet-wide channel in a voice that was very steady and very tired and very ready. They know what they came for. Show them we kept it. Stan did not have a word for what followed. She was a surveyor. Her vocabulary was built for geology and orbital mechanics and alloy composition reports. She did not have the right tools for this. It was not fast. It was not clean. She had expected, somewhere in the part of her that had watched too many Conclave propaganda dramas, something that would look like victory arriving. Something with momentum in it, an obvious direction, a clear shape. This was not that. This was large and brutal and full of cost, and it moved in every direction at once. 3 human ships were destroyed in the first hour. She watched them go on her sensor display. The readings, not the visuals, because there were no visuals at this range, just data, which was somehow harder. The readings for a ship with 300 crew aboard went flat in a way that was very specific and very final, and she made herself look at them because looking away felt like something she did not want to be. She noticed, watching the fleet's response to those losses, that it did not change. The formations held. The tactical pattern continued. The ships around the ones that had been destroyed closed the gap and went on. Not because the loss hadn't registered, she was certain it had, certain that somewhere in the fleet command structure people were receiving those flat readings and feeling them in the place where such things land. But the feeling and the fighting were separate. The fighting went on. She had read Section 7. She thought she understood now, in a way she hadn't before, what 10,000 years of practice looked like in a real engagement. The second hour was harder. The third was worse. The fourth was quiet in a way that meant something, but she couldn't decode what yet, the sensor data moving too fast for her to build a picture. Then the picture built itself. The enemy formations were pulling back. Not destroyed, not broken apart, not scattered, not ended, pulling back, withdrawing from the engagement with the same deliberate precision they had moved forward with, moving back into the dark of deep space, back beyond the sensor range of the conclave's outer stations, and then beyond the range of the human deep sensors, and then gone. Istan sat in her survey pod in the silence that followed, and did not move for a long time. They had been stopped. The word felt small and large at the same time. Everything the briefings had described, the first wars, the retreats, the rebuilding, the 10,000 years of patient building in the cold dark, all of it had been aimed at this. At being able to say no asterisk in a way that would be believed. At making the thing that had never been told no feel, for the first time, the weight of a no that had real force behind it. She opened her message system. She looked at the blank message form for a while. Then she typed one message to the conclave's central relay, addressed to the Human Liaison Office, to Soren Vale's account because it was the only human account she knew. She wrote, "How long were they waiting for that?" She sent it. She did not expect a fast response. It was a small question addressed to the wrong person in the middle of the largest event in conclave history. She expected it to sit in an inbox for days, maybe weeks, until someone had time for it. The response came back in 4 minutes. 4 words. Since before your history. Istan read the 4 words. She read them again. In the command ship first, Dara Osai sat alone in the chair she had come back from retirement to fill. The protocols were already running. The accounting of the dead, the damage assessments, the fleet status reports, the first of what would be many, many formal communications with the conclave. People were doing what needed doing, and they did not need her for any of it right now. She was very tired. Not the tired that meant broken. The tired that meant you have been carrying a weight for a long time, and you have finally put it down, and your arms remember the shape of it, and that will not go away quickly. She reached into the pocket of her jacket and took out a pen. Just a pen. Plain, unremarkable, the kind that sat in every liaison office and survey pod and diplomatic desk in the conclave. She had taken it off Soren Vale's desk 3 weeks ago without thinking about it. He probably hadn't noticed. She clicked it once. Set it on the arm of the chair. Looked at it there. The fleet was outside, holding position, doing the long and careful work of after. The conclave signals were coming in on every channel, 63 species, all of them with things to say, questions to ask, things to feel that needed somewhere to go. Section 7 would be the first of many disclosures. The ships buried in the ice were the first of many things that would need names and categories that didn't exist yet. There was so much left to do. She looked at the pen on the arm of the chair. She did not pick it up. She let it sit there in the quiet of the oldest ship in the human fleet, in the long silence after 11,000 years of waiting, in the first moment in all of that time that the silence did not have to be kept.